Today on Songs of Praise, we commemorate the many thousands of young men who lost their lives in one of the bloodiest battles of the First World War 100 years ago. I'm in the Somme battlefields to remember the 1st of July 1916, the first day of the Battle of the Somme and the worst day in the history of the British Army. More than 19,000 British soldiers were killed that day, with nearly 40,000 wounded or missing. I join James Bickersteth, retracing the steps of his great-great-uncles, the Reverend Julian Bickersteth and Lieutenant Maurice Bickersteth, who fell in battle.
So young. All these guys here, so young.
And I'm with the Living History Group of the Royal Warwickshire Regiment, finding out what life and faith might have been like in the trenches.
Those who served in the Somme were our grandparents and great-grandparents, our great-uncles and great-great-uncles, and it's them we're remembering in our music today. We begin with a hymn that's also a prayer in difficult times. This Friday marks the centenary of the start of one of the worst battles of the First World War. For 5 long months, the British and French armies engaged the Germans in a brutal war of attrition in the Battle of the Somme. After 141 days, they had still failed to break the German defences. Visitors to the Somme in northern France often speak of the peace and tranquility of the landscape. And then you look round and you see this. Memorials, rows and rows of gravestones that speak of the exact opposite. The Somme has become a place of pilgrimage for those remembering loved ones who fell in battle. James is here for the first time in search of a great-great-uncle who shares his name.
My full name is James Maurice Bickersteth, and I'm actually named after a descendant of mine called Maurice Bickersteth.
You look a bit like him.
That's very kind, thank you very much. He was a handsome chap and an officer in the British Army. He led a battalion of men in the Battle of the Somme.
So you're trying to find out what happened to him out here in the Somme?
Indeed, I'm blessed with a wealth of information that already exists in something called the Bickersteth Diaries. But it's always intrigued me as to the reality of his life and the actual location that he led his men, because there's only so much that you can learn through letters, but there's nothing like actually following in the footsteps of somebody to better understand the life that they led.
3 Bickersteth brothers served here at the Somme. 28-year-old Bergen, Julian, a frontline chaplain who was 31, and Maurice, just 25. Maurice would have been on trench duty for several months before going over the top to fight. Battlefield expert Alan Reid guides us through an original 1st of July trench.
100 years ago, this would have been a scene of horror, devastation, noise. The German shelling coming from behind us, German machine gun, men trying to get to the front line in this sort of communication trench. So Morris would have been coming into a trench like this one on the way to the front line.
The young lieutenant was in a battalion known as the Leeds Pals, part of the West Yorkshire Regiment.
So here, James, we've got some of the Leeds Pals when they were training in 1914, soon after they volunteered. And amongst these men, there's an officer, and it's him. It's Morris, wow, as a lieutenant.
Wow.
He was just commissioned. So that probably would be the man he was in charge of at the time. But come the day, on the 1st of July, he was acting captain in charge of 250 men.
That's incredible.
You must find this very moving.
I do. It's incredibly powerful. In fact, the first time that we walked down here, I actually had goosebumps. I do struggle to try and imagine the horrors that people saw here and the suffering, but also the incredible acts of bravery that took place here. They were doing it for something that they believed in. They believed in it for the country, and they believed in it for God.
Exactly. Morris at the time came from a very religious family. His father was a reverend in Leeds, so he put his faith into God, and if he was going to die,
so be it.
So be it.
And also the fact that they were waiting, not knowing when they were going to go over the top, for months and months, Alan.
Yes, they would have been training before coming to the Western Front, but what they didn't know what it would be like once they were over the top and into no man's land. That they could prepare for.
The order was finally given, and the battle began on the 1st of July, 1916.
So the path we are walking on now, was the British front line, exactly where we are. So Morris with his men would have gathered in the trenches on our left, and then at 7:30 a.m. he would have gathered his men to go over the top. And then when he goes into no man's land, about 10-30 yards, he stops because of what's going on. He sees men dying, men dead. And as he's trying to gather his thoughts, he's hit by shrapnel, by a piece of German shell. And that behind his back. We've got a witness account to that.
And he's killed instantly?
No, soon after that, he gets a bullet right to the head, and then he's killed instantly.
James, what's it like for you to hear that and to stand here and to know actually 30 yards in there was where Morris fell?
I've always wondered what his last moments were like. Always wondered what the place was like, that he gave his life. And to be here now is incredibly powerful for me, incredibly powerful. And there really is, I suppose, no better time for me to have come. For the first time, I'm ashamed to say, there's no better time for me to have come than the 100-year anniversary of the battle in which he gave his life.
We'll rejoin James later in the programme as he finally pays his respects to Morris.
have these first-hand accounts from soldiers, it's impossible to recreate the true horror. But David Grant has been meeting one group who tried to connect with the past.